Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Erev Tov, everyone. I want to, even before I begin, extend thanks and appreciation to Chris's brother, Peter, and his sister-in-law, Isabel, who have generously helped make tonight's program possible. So we thank them for that and for sharing Chris with us for so many years. I want to share just a couple of quick thoughts, and going to come back to Chris in a moment. But as we mark Jewish Disability Awareness and Inclusion Month, I think there are two or three central ideas within our tradition that we need to promulgate broadly if we want to make this month not just a month where we pay attention to it, but a commitment throughout the year. The first is the overarching idea that every human being is created B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. When I look at any other human being, if I see the spark of divinity, the spark of holiness, the spark of sanctity that animates them, that is inherent in everyone, that has to transform all of my interactions, all of my engagements with the other person, and has to elevate it to a set of lofty expectations. And that is especially true when we are working to be more inclusive of people who often feel and at times are on the margins of the Jewish community. And so that picture is what we are challenged by the Torah from its very inception to see when we see others. And that same idea of B'Tselem Elohim also underlies the bracha that we are supposed to recite when we see people who are obviously other. And our sages recognize that the bracha mishaneh habriot, that God, in creating the universe, in creating the world, in creating all of us, creates all of us in our own unique way, but each of us remains an image of the Holy One. And the sages reminded us that at a moment when we might easily find ourselves ignoring it, it is at that very moment that we must affirm it even more powerfully. And so we have a concept, we have an articulation of it, and the last piece is the idea embedded in the Talmud that the transition, the ability to make someone familiar, is not all that difficult. And that once someone is familiar in the town, in the community, then their incorporation and inclusion is that much easier. And it is that idea that sort of brings me back to Chris, in whose memory this evening was dedicated. Some of you, as I look around at the various screens, knew Chris Ramsey. Some of you did not. There were very few, I think, who appreciated some of the struggles and some of what he had overcome in his life. But I would like to suggest that part of what helped him, at least in the period of time that we knew him, was that we allowed him to become familiar in our community. we enabled him to be familiar with all of us. And as such, he found a sense of place and a sense of people and a sense of community. And that to us is a model that needs to be replicated over and over and over again. And I think that is the ultimate underlying purpose of Jewish Disability Awareness and Inclusion Month, and of programs like this, so that we can learn how to better make our institutions and our communities ones that allow people who might feel marginalized or at arm's length feel an embrace of welcome, a hand that's reaching out to pull them in and allow them to become familiar and therefore part of our community. Amen. Manya, I turn the floor over to you to introduce the rest of our program.
Thank you, Rabbi. I appreciate your kind words. It was really beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for joining us for our first ever JDAIM event. We will have the opportunity to hear from two experts this evening. Our one expert had to, unfortunately, change her schedule, and we will try to make a better time to speak with her, but we have two amazing people to hear from tonight. First, we will be hearing from Glenn Liebman. He is the longtime director of the Mental Health Association in New York State, and they are a non-for-profit health organization that provides community-based mental health services. They are engaged in advocacy, education, and public awareness, which is what JDAIM is all about. His organization is dedicated to improving the lives of people with mental health issues and eradicating the stigma of mental health illness. We will then hear from Christopher Lyons, and he has been the Chief Executive Officer at AIM Services since 2018. AIM has quickly become one of the largest and leading service providers for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in New York State. It was formed in 1979 and is a nonprofit organization providing residential and community-based supports to people with developmental and intellectual differences. I give you Glenn.
Thank you very much, Manya.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Rabbi, and thank you. I really, appreciate being here today, and I just really wanted to really, talk a little bit about mental health related issues, and also talk a little bit about Chris. I knew Chris, and I didn't know Chris well, but I knew Chris, and he was a wonderful man. And just sort of reminiscing, and I'm so glad, I see Peter here, and I'm so glad because, when I think of Chris, and I've known Chris for many years. I've been director of the Mental Health Association for almost 20 years, but prior to that, I was in state service. But even before that, I was at NAMI, or what was then called the Alliance for the Mentally Ill. And I've known Chris for many years. I knew him back then. And when I think of Chris, I think of that smile, that positive attitude. Every time I saw Chris, he was always upbeat. He was always positive. We would talk about school and political science and all that fun stuff. And, both our interests and our passions around political science stuff. And we'd have these conversations. And he was just so smart and just so positive. Every time I saw him, I remember he worked briefly for the Office of Mental Health. I remember seeing him there. I ran into him at brewery. I mean, every time I saw him, it was always like such a positive energy exchange. And he just was just such an upbeat person. And I really miss him. I'm so sorry, Peter, for your loss, and your family's loss, and everybody in the synagogue's loss as well. And I actually, again, early on, going back years, I actually knew June Ramsey, your mom. June was also a wonderful person. She was just, she was in it for all the right reasons. Sometimes people get into the volunteer sector for whatever reason, but she was just so giving and just so wonderful and just nice to be around. And just, she was always never about herself. It was always about the greater good of the community, which, Rabbi, you talked about. And I think that exemplifies the Ramseys. And it's just like that's just who they were and are. So I just really, I just, I really miss Chris, just a wonderful man. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of the stuff. I mean, we talk about mental health. I could be talking about it for 4 hours and not even get to really what people really want to know about. So I'll just be very brief. I'll talk about 3 different things in the mental health arena. So right now, again, as I was introduced, we're a statewide organization with 26 members in 52 counties across the state. And mostly we provide community-based mental health services, but we're also very engaged in advocacy and public policy changes and that sort of thing. So what we decided to do several years ago, and I know as Kim was on and off, and I don't think she's on right now, and Kim was really a key part of our team for many years, and just a wonderful, Kim and Sam were just wonderful people. And, Kim was an inspiring voice for us in many ways. And one of the things that we did was we really kind of changed our focus a little bit. We were always about adult mental health services, but to really get to the heart of the matter, it's a lot about prevention. So, when you're an adult in the mental health system, that's different than when you're a child who's struggling with mental health issues. And I myself have been a family member of a child who struggled with mental health issues. So I've worn it both as an advocate and as a family member. And the thing is that we really we made a strategy call to say, okay, we're going to start focusing much more attention around the K through 12 population, because that's where kids are during the day. They're at school. How can we make a difference in that way? So we worked very hard over several years to create legislation that called for mental health. Essentially, it's basically parity. Mental health to be treated the same way as other health related issues. And one of those ways to do it was to be in schools and teach about mental health. So through a lot of work and a lot of advocacy, and Kim, and smiles because Kim was right in the middle of it, we were able to mandate the teaching of mental health instruction in schools. It was a big thing. In New York was the first state in the country to do it, so we were very, very proud of that fact. But what we were more proud of was the fact that we were able to see some systemic changes. So it wasn't just about now a school feels, okay, I can teach about mental health in schools. A lot of schools already did that. But what we were trying to do was say, let's change the school culture here. Let's talk about mental health issues much more openly. Let's talk about these things. Let's talk about strategies for how to deal with someone who does have a mental health issue or is just having a bad day. Their anxiety, they have, their anxiety, their depression. There are things that they have to do to normalize their mental health issues. So let's talk about that. So we were lucky. We got embraced by the State Office of Mental Health and the State Education Department, and we were really able to sort of create a cultural shift. Now, that not alone was the reason that there's been this culture shift around mental health in schools, and there's still a long way to go, but schools are much more open about talking about it. We have a school resource center where people, they reach out to us. We have conversation with schools. We have, all these programs we have for teachers, for students, for, educators, school board members, to basically talk about mental health, talk about how we can have strategies to identify some issues where we can talk about things that are mental wellness strategies. And so again, that's where we decided to spend a lot of our energy and time, because it really is, mental health is a lifespan issue for many people. And we wanted to be on the preventative side. So those young people don't end up as adults in the mental health system, that hopefully if we can get them early on, and again, the science is much better, medications are much better, services are better, but what we really need to do is really start at an early age. We can't emphasize that enough. And now we're even talking about perinatal stuff, prenatal stuff, that's maternal mental health. That's the kind of thing we really have to get involved in. And, to the State Office of Mental Health's credit, they're very much involved in that as well. So they're much more engaged in that. So again, I could talk for hours, but Rachel just stopped me when time's up. But so that's one thing. The other two things I just want to highlight are specifically around 988. I don't know how many of you are familiar with 988. 988 is a relatively new thing. There was signed into law a few years ago and actually implemented in July of this past year. So everybody's familiar with 911, of course. Crisis, you call 911. Well, since the last year, and there have been resources, 988 is now the crisis line for people with mental health or substance use issues. So if you have a mental health issue, you have a substance use issue, you call 988. And their response time has been really, really impressive. They have been able to respond to most crisis calls in under a minute. So people should really, and what the state is trying to do is they're trying to bring all kinds of resources to 988 so that people can talk to a trained clinician if they're in crisis. And 98% of the time, those crises are adjudicated. Sound like a lawyer, but they're adjudicated essentially within that time frame of a minute, 2 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, that they don't have to go to a higher level of care. But there's 2% of folks who do need a higher level of care. They're building in something called crisis stabilization centers. Those crisis stabilization centers are, think of urgent care for mental health and substance use. So, break a finger or whatever, you go to urgent care. You have a substance use crisis or you have a mental health crisis, you call 988. 988 says, this is too much of an issue for us. We can't handle this specifically. Now, a lot of times what would happen? People would end up in emergency rooms. People would end up in in some certain situations, end up incarcerated. But here, there's a way you can go to these urgent care centers, and there is being, this is in the last year, so there is being one that's going to be created in Albany County. I'm not sure exactly where in Albany County, but there will be. So people will be able to sort of hopefully mitigate the crisis, not go to the emergency room. And I know, as a family member myself and many family members out there, the biggest fear we have is, what do we do when our loved one's in crisis? And where do they end up? And what do we do? And we call up emergency, we called up 911, and what's going to happen is the emergency, or who's going to come? It's going to be a mobile crisis team. Is it going to be an ambulance? Who's going to come and take care of our loved ones? So that, hopefully those are mitigating strategies. And hopefully it just, again, if you're not familiar with 988, please, ask any questions you want about it, or tell your friends, your family, whoever. We really want to spread the word about 988. And the final thing I'll just talk about real quickly is, this is an issue that's become a major issue in the state budget this year. So mental health has been in the news so much. We all know that, right? And you can't turn on the TV without hearing a mental health story. Matter of fact, which is ironic because some of us have been doing this a long time, Washington posted a survey a few months ago. 90% of Americans agree we're in a mental health crisis. Think about the number, 90%. 90% of the country, a third of the country still thinks the earth is flat. So we're like 90% of people all recognize that we are in whatever side of the aisle you're on, you're all recognizing that we're in a mental health crisis. So states are responding. The president has responded with a lot of funding for the budget. And if you've been paying attention to what's gone on in the state budget, the governor has provided the most funding for mental health that any governor ever has before, almost $1 billion. It's over several years, but it's almost $1 billion, which is remarkable. There are many years, and I look to you, Kim, because you know this as well as I do. There were many years we would go look in the state of the state and we wouldn't see mental health even mentioned. This year, the governor led with this in the state of the state about mental health. She had a big event the day after touting all the things that were in mental health. So it's a real sea change for us, and it's great, and very supportive of those changes. But the one thing that she failed to add in the funding was funding for workforce. There was a small cost of living adjustment, but it's really small, and it does not meet the needs of our community. So in some ways, you can't have it both ways. You can't say we're going to expand, and it's going to expand when we have an existing mental health crisis, when it's so hard to hire workers. Talk to anybody who's in our field, talk to any of my members, talk to anyone we work with, and they'll tell you their biggest issue is retaining staff, recruiting staff, constant themes you hear all the time. And common sense, you can develop the greatest programs in the world. If you don't have the people to staff it, what's the point? So, and my standard line about this is that people enter our fields, the human service sector, because they want to make a difference in people's lives. They really do. That's why people do it. My son's in the field. That's why he does it, because he's mission driven. But mission driven doesn't pay the rent. And we have to pay our people a salary that recognizes all that they do on a daily basis to help people recover and move forward in their lives. So that's really, an essential part of all the things we do. So a lot of our advocacy this year and over the next month, because April 1 is the budget is due. So for the next month, all we're going to be talking about is 8.5% COLA. It's currently 2.5 is what the governor talked about, and we want to move it up to the 8.5%. So again, that's all we're going to be talking about. And then just to conclude, and I mentioned this to Rachel in the beginning, is that if you want to be more involved and engaged with mental health advocacy, we have our mental health legislative day next week, Mental Health Matters. It's next Wednesday. It's in the concourse, meeting room 6. If you'd like to participate, if you'd like to register, you can go to our website, www.mhanys.org. And you also get, Kim, a free t-shirt. But not the one, unfortunately, Kim used to design the t-shirts over the years, not designed by you, but it's a nice design. So, yep. So you get a t-shirt, and it's, joking aside about the t-shirts and the food and all that, and there's no cost, but it brings you to a group of people who are like-minded, who want to change the system, who recognize that people with mental health have been basically looked on in terms of the stigma of mental health issues. And we still see that stigma, unfortunately. We've seen it in the city with the violence, people with mental health issues, violent. We're looking to change that. We are consistently trying the drumbeat to raise awareness about mental health insurance, mental health coverage, mental health, advocacy, and really about public awareness. So, again, I would encourage people, if you are interested, to come join us next week. It's a great event. So again, I could go on and on, but I will stop now. I'm sure there'll be questions. Hopefully. Yeah.
We'll certainly have questions. I'm gonna start AIM off. Thankfully, they're gracious enough to share their new campaign video with us. That's actually going live tomorrow. So we'll get a little sneak peek here. So I'm gonna share my screen, and I hope everybody enjoys, and then Chris will take the floor away for us.
We all want it.
Connection is at the base of all human need. Without connection, we don't ever really understand what it means to love or to feel.
And knowing that, it's an amazing gift to have.
But we don't always know how to ask for it.
Connection is communication, being heard.
Everybody deserves to be heard. Everybody deserves respect.
Whether we have it or whether we don't, we feel it.
When we connect with people, we understand them.
To have that, it makes you feel comfortable, it makes you feel open, it makes you feel like you have
Oops, sorry about that. It should be
like you have someone that you can count on.
And that there's a mutual kindred spirit.
Sometimes we miss it, but when we see it right in front of us, we realize it's everywhere.
Connection to me, for the people we support, is genuine relationships. Anyone really wanting a rich and meaningful life, to be happy and joyful, starts with good relationships.
It welcomes you to come as you are.
In so many ways here at AIM, we're about relationships.
Sometimes it's as small as encouraging them to speak up at their doctor's appointments, and sometimes it's making a friend at the park.
It's really about that mutual exchange, not just being
in something or involved in something, but really having that personal investment in it.
It means the difference between belonging and just fitting in.
Connections are just vital to be able to have a happy life.
I've been doing great.
Beautiful.
We can search for it, but we have to be ready to receive it.
We get to know them first, who they are, what are their interests, what are their goals, their desires, their hopes and dreams, and we build their supports around that.
The goal is always to impart meaning in their life and get them to live the most independent life possible on their terms.
AIM for connection.
AIM for connection.
AIM for connection.
Connection.
When we find it, it feels like home.
Thank you, everyone. And Chris, the floor is all yours.
It's kind of late for me. I'm old, and I'm gonna speak quickly because I got to get home. My wife's very mad at me. She says I don't respect her privacy. At least that's what she wrote in her diary. Well, no, I'm serious. She's mad. She got very mad when she caught me cheating when she found the letters I had hidden, and now she won't play Scrabble with me anymore. All right. I'm sorry. Sorry for the bad jokes from the crusty Irish goyim. I apologize. Why don't we start again? Shalom to everyone gathered here this evening, and especially Todah Rabbah to Temple Israel and to Rachel and Rabbi. And it's great. It's an honor to be included with Glenn. I mean, he's a heavy hitter in the field, and has done a remarkable job from NAMI through to the New York State Mental Health Association. Interestingly enough, we collaborate with all those organizations represented by Glenn on a very close basis. I work very closely with Andrea Deep at Warren Washington Mental Health. I think she's actually on your board, Glenn.
She is. She's wonderful.
Sybil Newman, who is the executive director at RISE, which is the Saratoga County version of Warren Washington Mental Health, because we support cross populations that not only are challenged with some cognitive or developmental disability, but also have a mental health issue. In fact, AIM is well known throughout the state as being innovative in these kinds of supports for high needs individuals who have a juxtaposed executive function challenge, but also maybe schizophrenic or personality disorder, or all of the things that Glenn and his organization support so fabulously well. And I'll put in a pitch because I could cut part of my talk out. Glenn covered perfectly what one of our challenges is right now, and that's workforce. We did get a COLA last year, and I'm so pleased that the governor included the nearly $1 billion for mental health support, because that will benefit some of our supports for those who are duly diagnosed. But workforce is a big challenge, and that 8.5, Glenn, we're plugging for it as well for AIM and all the like agencies throughout New York State that support people with developmental disabilities.
Excellent.
So let me back up and thank you, Glenn. We've had a few opportunities to be in the same room together with like-minded execs, and I want to thank you for all the work you've done. You've been a stalwart for a very challenging area where people are misunderstood, they're stigmatized and marginalized, and so thank you for your work. And I'm honored to be included this evening with you and all the good work that you have done. So I'm Chris Lyons, by the way. I'm the CEO at AIM Services. I was a scum-sucking trial attorney for over 30 years. So forgive me. But I did specialize in healthcare litigation, and I was on the board at AIM for many years before I decided to hang up my spurs, so to speak, and come to work at AIM. I was the senior director and counsel for several years, and then became CEO 5 years ago. And I want to talk a little bit about the paradigm of service delivery for people with developmental disabilities. I'll try to be brief, and I promise to be dramatic. But many of you have heard of Willowbrook and some of the institutionalized settings that we used to support people with developmental disabilities at was Geraldo Rivera, that went into Willowbrook in the 1972 with a hidden camera and revealed the abuse and neglect going on in that Staten Island facility. There was federal litigation over it. That's when the Office of Mental Hygiene started to break off, as Glenn knows, and that we went into the OMH and into what was then OMRDD. And that's when it was interesting. They split off the state organizations that focused on citizens with mental health and citizens with developmental disability. We're starting to coalesce back in for purposes of shared resources, understanding that there's a lot of crossover and supporting people in the state who have been marginalized. At any rate, the old paradigm when we deinstitutionalized folks with developmental disabilities was the old group home, which was really just a reincarnation of the developmental cinder block setting. I call it the glorified babysitting setting, where people with cognitive challenges were seen as less and marginalized and need to be shuttered, protected, bubbled, and taught how to at least manage their lives as normal. And there was a lot of substitution of judgment, and the experts in the circle of supports were all telling this person what they needed to do. Here are the services you must access. Here are the supports you must take advantage of so that you can function in society. When I got to AIM, we turned that on its head. We became from an agency-driven agency to a person-driven agency. And instead of speaking at people, we started listening to everyone that we supported with a developmental disability, and not just with our ears, but our heart, our mind, our professional judgment. And so that everything we started to do was not controlling, but supporting. Instead of controlling someone for health and safety purposes, feeling that we were doing good work, we started to shift and transcend challenges, developmental and mental health challenges, and see the person and support who they genuinely were. I tell everybody that comes through the door at AIM, and we're a huge agency, 3,400 employees. We go all the way to Long Island and support thousands of people with challenges. I said, if you want to be a special person doing special things for special people, so you go home and feel special, don't work here. That's not what we're about. I think the rabbi said a spark of sanctity, perfect, so that we could actually have people that were familiar in our community. Perfect. We could have just stopped with that beautiful message at the beginning of this evening about transcending challenges and seeing people for who they really are, just like us. I mean, we all have challenges. I have plenty. Ask my wife. But we all can transcend those challenges to see our likeness, to see our familiarity, to see our community, so that we're not just in the community, like doing special things for special people, but the people we support are of our community, like Chris Ramsey, like the person that we're honoring tonight, who was actually seen and understood and appreciated for who he was and what he contributed to. Equal coordination of relationships and connections where everyone was valued with the same dignity and respect that we want from each other. So at AIM, our approach is very what we call person-centered, where we actually listen to who the person is. What are their hopes, their dreams, their desires? How do they express themselves spiritually? How do they express themselves sexually? Where do they want to live? Who do they want to live with? What do they want to be competent at? What are their joys? What are their passions? Where do they want to go? What do they want to learn? What do they want to try? Too often we tend to shelter people with challenges for what I call a selfish fear of what will happen to me if I'm responsible for someone and they want to learn. I use the old adage, you know, if you make it across the street to Stewart's to get ice cream, that's a good day for me because nothing bad happened to you. But what if you made it across the street to Stewart's for ice cream and it was your responsibility and you had to take responsibility for something bad happening? At the core of our human dignity is our ability to own our own successes in life, the natural consequences of our choices. And this is a shift the way we think about people who are different, because we want to protect them. We don't want any harm to happen to them because we feel responsible. Well, what happened to the dignity of learning from your failures? You can't own your own successes if you're not allowed to own your own failures. So at AIM, we encourage the right to risk. We encourage learning from the natural consequences of choices, of exploring our worlds, of expanding our universes, just like we enjoy. I mean, we all have that string of successes and failures that define who we are, the beautiful mosaic that is each person here this evening. And we all want to be seen for that unique person. And yet we bucket people with challenges and stigmatize and see them only as the disability and not the ability. So as the rabbi said, that spark of sanctity, transcending to create a familiarity so that people actually are seen and loved and appreciated and understood and connected, just like we all would want. So supporting that, and there's a common sense approach to this. We support some people who are profoundly challenged. We support people who have significant dual diagnosis, like the folks that Glenn's folks support, who really are, have not only have bad days, but when you call 911, I'm worried that the police will show up and not understand the person that we support. So we're constantly doing outreach to get communities to understand how to react to somebody. You know, a person with autism might try to return to a burning building. So it's just this whole idea of seeing through challenges and seeing people so that they start to feel valued. Many of the people we support, and there's all those stigmatizing words about mild, moderate, and profound developmental disabilities, and all those terrible words that we used to use. The person first language is very powerful and important in our world today. Don't call people a disabled person. They're a person with a challenge. There's nothing disabled about their personhood. But being able to actually have a consciousness of supporting independence for its own sake, and having a common sense approach to having people be able to learn from as I said, the natural consequences of their choices. So 95% of the people we support are what you would call pretty independent, and certainly, like people with mental health issues, are in and hopefully of our communities. And they're making their way and imparting meaning in their life, hopefully on their terms and not terms that are controlling. And I use the example of, we have some supported environments that aren't supervised environments. Some of our people are significantly challenged to the point of needing 24/7, 365 days a year supports in congregate certified by the state settings. But some live in apartments or settings that they don't get services all the time, and we might give 40 or 60 hours. And I use the old scenario of John in that setting, who has a job at Price Chopper, wants to date Mary, who works as a receptionist somewhere, and we support both of them. And we're not going to help John get to pick up Mary to go to the movies, because we know John and he's going to break Mary's heart. Anybody here ever had their heart broken? I have, and I've been allowed to. The natural consequences of my relationships and my choices. And it is having your heart broken that shows you what real love is, real commitment, real relationships. But we want to protect people from things with this well-intentioned idea that we know better. And yet people can learn. People can learn from all the panoply, that beautiful rainbow of the good and bad from our free will and choices. And that's the spark of sanctity. That's seeing the person for who they are. So at AIM, we embrace this model. We teach it. It's in the very fabric of everything we do, from our human resources department to our fiscal department to our maintenance department, our ops department. I mean, we're a big agency, but everyone is inspired to carry this as their own truth. We don't examine it, but we hope they carry it as their own truth, so that, like a pebble in a pond, you can get this reverberation out, as Glenn and Rabbi said, to start to accept people in that familiarity, because that familiarity is what really, truly supports our humanity. That's what we're trying to do at AIM. So we have a wide variety of services. Some are traditional legacy services of the residential supports that you might see in your neighborhoods. We have self-directed services where people manage their own budgets to hire their own staff so that they have customized supports. And the paradigm is constantly pushing for independence and greater ability to impart meaning in your life on your terms. It's it's an amazing thing to support somebody in a way that really resonates, so that you don't feel good because you've done something good. You feel good because you've supported someone being able to move to a lesser restrictive environment and be able to gain a certain sense of independence. So my message is transcend the challenges, see the people. You all have this spiritual connection, and certainly the work Glenn's done is astounding for shedding light on the darkness of so many people with mental health issues. But as the rabbi said, that familiarity of community is really the action plan to transcend challenges and to see that, you know, we can all be each other's parachutes. You don't need a parachute to go skydiving. You just need a parachute to go skydiving twice. So we can all be there for each other when we are living life and be each other's parachutes. So I'm really grateful to be here tonight. It's always wonderful to be able to reach out to like-minded people who have an open mind and a race consciousness, who want to embrace the theme of this month, which is inclusion and awareness and acceptance and love. How'd I do on time?
Perfect, Chris. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn the floor back to Manya, who has a couple questions that were already sent in, and then we'll open up the floor to everybody else here.
Hi, thank you both, Chris and Glenn. One of the questions we received is, what is proper terminology? Is it people with differences? Is it disability? Is it inability? What is the proper language? We know there are certain words that are no longer used, and there are certain words that are now currently used, and we just, you know, wondering what the right way to approach this is with our resources, with conversation, and just, you know, treating these people respectfully and using the proper language.
Chris, I think you kind of talked about it a little bit, Chris. I think you're, you know, I have a specific perspective, but I think, Chris, you're much more expert than I am.
Well, it's a shifting world, as you know, Glenn. People don't want to be usurped. So many people. I used the word lame in a speech 20 years ago in Minnesota when I was advising the state on the right to risk, and a woman in a wheelchair came up and said, "Never use that word again." And I apologized and said, "Thank you. I'm enlightened." We used to call people with developmental disabilities patients. In fact, there was a moral model that if you had someone with that kind of challenge, that God was punishing you. And then we went to the medical model, and they were clients, and then they were consumers, and now they're individuals. So the language that we would use for each other is the language of ability, diverse ability. So it is one of the tips I would say is using disability as an adjective is a no-no. Describing someone as possessing as part of their overall existence a challenge that's visible and noticeable is okay, and then work from there. And I ask people, I mean, I'm always learning, we're always head checking each other. There is no right answer. I mean, some people don't like the Special Olympics because it's congregating people and underscoring differences. And some people say that's a wonderful opportunity for participation. So you could get a different answer today for each of the shifting paradigms. So I'll let Glenn weigh in.
You know, and well said, Chris. I agree 100%. And, you know, it's interesting going back, you know, Chris, you had the example of lame. When I started at NAMI this 25, 30 years ago, they still talked openly about the schizophrenic mother. I mean, can you imagine that, you know, that mothers being blamed for their loved one's schizophrenia? I mean, that was used. That was like almost like common usage, schizophrenic mother. I mean, so we've come very far around language, thankfully, but we still have a long way to go. One of my pet peeves, and most people do this still, is that say the mentally ill. Like it's like one big grouping, the mentally ill. How about individuals with mental health related issues? I mean, I think individual language is really key here, and you really have to recognize, like Chris said, you know, you really have to recognize everybody's abilities and sort of focus on that, and be cognizant that, which, you know, you don't have to be the making sure everything you say is appropriate, but you should have enough common sense to be able to address people for their abilities, for what they do, for their strengths, and not say, the mentally ill or anything like that. Use individual language.
Thank you. What can we as the Albany Jewish community do to be more accessible and inviting for members of this community?
Chris, okay. Well, thank you for the question. I think that, forums like this one are incredibly significant, and it's great to see lots of people here, and it's great to see the leadership of TI and the rabbi and Rachel and everybody else who's involved. I think that's important. The more we can spread the word, the better it is. We are looking constantly. Our outreach is to different communities of faith. We think that they're incredibly significant. One thing that we do is something called mental health first aid, where we go into communities, and basically it's a training that's provided to have a greater understanding about mental health related issues. We go into, we'll go to synagogues, we go to churches statewide to have these kinds of conversations where people are understanding much more about mental health related issues. And those are significant steps forward. But, I would say it takes a lot of advocacy and a lot of linkages with community partners. I think that's key. And more forums like this one. I think this is really, and kudos to all of you for doing this, and Peter, and kudos to all of you for doing this.
Yeah, this evening is a good mitzvah. This is a very good thing for collective reflection and transformation. So yes, I mean, it's an ugly enough world post-pandemic out there. It saddens me. I always try to be light. My kids hate when I talk to the clerk at the Price Chopper because I'm going to tell a bad dad joke, but I do anyways to understand somebody's difficult day. Somebody with a mental health issue or somebody with a developmental disability lives with that all the time. And so once we cut through the general difficulty of managing our day and start to understand that somebody may be coming at the universe from a slightly different orientation is a great way to start. Just to be open-minded about, walking a mile in somebody's moccasins, I guess.
Gotcha. I like that. How can we be allies and advocates to support the members in this community? You've touched on that a little bit in your answers to other questions, but how, if you're not part of volunteering already and being active, I know you have mentioned Kim a couple times, and that's amazing that, she has been involved, but how can our community and other community get involved and volunteer and support and advocate?
Well, from mine, again, Kim is your perfect example. Kim was on our staff, but also very much a volunteer and a real leader. So I think one way, again, she probably answered better than me, but one way that you can get involved is go to our website. I mentioned it earlier, www.mhanys.org. And you can reach out to us if there's something that we're doing around. I talked about school, but we do a lot of work around family engagement. We do a lot of work in many different areas. Our advocacy, that's our event next week. We have our fundraiser in the spring. We have all kinds of events. If people want to get involved, go to our website and really reach out to us. We're very responsive. We have a great team and people are very responsive. So please reach out to us, and that's how you get more engaged. We have interns. We try to do as much as possible to bring the community into our, into the mental health world, because it's a battle, and we need as many partners as possible to help move our agenda forward.
Right after you go to Glenn's website, go to our website. AIM, our chief
Both are right in the chat now.
our Chief Communications Director, Bo Galieber, is with us this evening, and she's a force majeure to say the least. But yeah, there's an awful lot of information on aimservicesinc.org. But certainly promoting with your local legislature. Glenn gave a wonderful outline of what's going on now with some of the initiatives. Hochul's $1 billion over several years is not for sure. We'd like to have the 2.4, 5, or 6 up to 8.5. These are all things that a quick note or letter saying, hey, workforce is crucial right now to changing things. You saw our little video. Most of what we do that's successful is based on our direct support professionals and the connections and relationships they build. Whether you're challenged with a mental health issue, which requires avoiding decompensation and being familiar in your community and being encouraged to stay on the course of supports that you have, or you have a developmental disability and wanted to expand your universe or try something, whatever those things are, it's our direct support folks. It's the folks on the ground and the clinicians that support them that are key to the success of continuing to expand people's opportunities in the community. So legislatively being involved, check out our website. Go to Glenn's fundraising events and then sign up for our fundraising events. They're all fun. Yeah, so and you know, we are fun. I mean, Glenn works with a lot of incredibly wonderful people to be around, because as he said with his son, my son had mental health issues, but he said with his son who works in the field, he's mission driven, and that doesn't pay the rent. So you're going to be involved with people that are inspired to do something where it's not just for the paycheck. The greatest thing you can do with your life is make a difference in someone else's. And we are joyfully affording that opportunity to our workforce every day. So I slipped in another speech.
That's so well said, Chris. And I just want to add again that you bring up, I mean, that was great, but it's so well said that, you know, look, you're probably all very involved, obviously very involved with TI, but you're also probably very involved with your community, and you probably have relations with legislators. They have to know about this 8.5. You know, we have some really powerful, significant, important, good people like, you know, Neil Breslin, Pat Fay. I mean, you know, we could go down the line. Paul Tonko in Congress is a great advocate for people with mental health and developmental disability issues. I mean, so we have great advocates, but the more we can ring the bell, the more we can raise voices to say 8.5, 8.5, 8.5, the better we're able to get the legislature to move forward on that. And the direct care folks are everything. They are key. They're integral to the success of everything. It's all relational. Like in the beginning of your video, Chris, it's all relational. And those direct support professionals are the ones who really, you know, are the key to an individual's recovery. I truly believe that.
Thank you. I appreciate both of your responses. What do you think are some challenges that may face those you support, that maybe individuals that don't have as much of a visual difference or a visual challenge understand or appreciate?
I took the last one, Chris. It's all yours.
It's easy to shift your orientation when you have identified someone in the community as somebody that might have a challenge, mental health or developmental. But I would say everybody has mental health issues, and we all have challenges. I mean, nobody's perfect. Nobody is superhuman. So whether it's visible or not, how do we treat each other? How do we greet each other? We're becoming more and more afraid to be vulnerable with each other. Trust is harder to come by in our society. So I would, my best advice when you don't visually see something, but you're going to be orienting yourself to someone who doesn't immediately present as someone with a difficulty, is that's how you should treat everybody. The last thing somebody with a challenge wants to be treated as is immediately different. Like, you know, like you talk louder to the person with mental health issues. If you talk louder, they'll understand you. It's like somebody speaks a foreign language. That's a non-starter. So
Right.
I don't have a great answer to it, but I think it's really just the way you carry yourself in life with others.
Yeah. And the other thing I would just add to that answer is that public awareness is key. You have to be out there talking to the public, again, forums like this one, but just public awareness in general. There should be more PSAs out there. There should just be more information. You know, I'm amazed that when I speak and I talk about 988, I mean, 988 now, you know, in our world, it's like, that's all we talk about, but still probably 95% of the state doesn't even know that 988 exists. And those are the kind of things that we really have to do, you know, greater amount of public awareness on. And it was a little, again, hard to complain about $1 billion in new funding. So, you know, it looks like, you know, oh my God, what are you talking about? But it would have been nice if there was just a small amount of it specifically for public awareness to go and have these kinds of campaigns to talk about the normal, you know, in my world, the normalization of mental health. You know, most people, you know, as Chris said, most people do have mental health related issues. I mean, statistically, you know, 50% of us have some sort of mental health related issues over the course of a lifetime. Clearly, there are different issues that are exacerbated, but why don't we normalize it, have those kinds of conversations to normalize it? If there were physical illnesses that 50% of people had, we would be spending billions and billions and billions of dollars. And yet, because it's mental health, there's not that kind of funding that's being spent out there for public awareness.
And it's harder to.
I see you, Peter.
When you say the quickly identified physical appearance of somebody, the old stigma was if somebody was talking to themselves, maybe they had visions or were challenged with some kind of schizoaffective disorder. But nowadays they just could have earbuds in and are getting the grocery list from somebody at home. So it's almost impossible. We live in a universe that is shifting all the time, and particularly with non-binary people and language in support of people that identify differently. Our world is becoming so mosaic that it's a test to what the rabbi said, the spark of sanctity in all of us, and that joining together and giving and providing familiarity. So, you know, it takes a village, I guess.
Thank you. It does definitely take a village. I know Peter has a question. I saw him unmute himself.
I think I am. Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted. You're good to go.
It's not a question. It's a comment,
Okay.
if I could.
Sure.
First of all, I want to thank you all of you, for honoring my brother in this way. Thank you, Rabbi, for those exquisite words. You have a gift. But I want to share a couple things very quickly. Glenn, thank you for what you said about Chris and particularly about my mom. My first professional job in my career was for National Commercial Bank before it became Key Bank. My second job was the financial fundraiser for the Association for Retarded Children, which was in a $1 a year building that the mayor gave to the organization back then. I learned a lot. Sheltered workshops, things like that. Your state, I happen to be a resident of Massachusetts, which is a pretty fair state on these issues too. But your state is remarkable. Yes, $1 billion committed by your governor. My wife and I met in 1982. Within an hour, we both knew we had schizophrenic siblings. My wife's sister was from South Carolina. She didn't get Clozaril till quite a long time after Chris got it through CDBC in Albany. Changed the trajectory of his life. But when you want to talk about how to help something, and Glenn reminded me because he mentioned my mom and her work with NAMI and everything else, because she knew that with a schizophrenic son, she had to do everything she could to advocate for him. That's where I was going to go, is the families of these individuals who are different in whatever ways they're different, need to be supported because it's so hard for them to support them every day and to pick them up when they're down, or when a community looks upon them as somehow, as several people have alluded, there's, you know, something's wrong with them. Yeah, the terrible idea of the schizophrenic mom, you know, my Lord. But again, I want to go back and thank you really for what you did here tonight and holding Chris up, because you welcomed him. That's why, in a sense, he made the conversion. He also believed, but he found in you a community of people who supported him. Yes, he looked different. You know, you all seen the picture. I mean, there were the way he presented at times, you know, but he felt loved and appreciated and respected. And that's what you're talking about here tonight. So all I would say is thank you for that. And think of the families who live with this 24/7 and who work so hard. And some don't even have, in a sense, the resources or the networks. But here you are, again, building another one in the way you do to embrace people. So I just thank you for listening. Thank you for including Isabel and me in this, but it's really, it's about you and the marvelous work you do in that Temple community, believe me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Does anyone else have a question they would like to ask either Chris or Glenn? I can't say I have, no, we have 2 pages, but here. No additional questions?
I have one.
Rachel?
And I don't know, Chris, if you're not comfortable, don't mind, but earlier when we were speaking, I mentioned how a number of years ago, I remember hearing about individuals in the community trying to open up a Jewish home for individuals where they can feel included and also be able to observe their, whether it be kosher or religious background. Can you shed a little bit of what you were talking about earlier, if you don't mind?
No, I'm happy to. Yeah, we're working with Martina Zobel. You might know her from Skidmore. She advocates for the Jewish community up there. She has a son with challenges, and she's collecting like-minded folks to have something that's going to coalesce around a traditional Jewish community that is an intentional community to support that population in a small setting. And we're helping with the program and fundraising for that effort. It's past its embryonic stages, but yes, Peter, family is everything. I was remiss to not focus on that as being such an important part of that circle of supports. We support families because there's a direct effect on the people that they love and care for. And so this intentional community up in Saratoga is hope to be a very modern, very nice setting of 12 to 16 folks with a variety of challenges that build a community. And it hasn't quite coalesced with a great deal of specificity, but I know Martina's driving it with Jewish traditions in mind. And so we're excited to be a part of that. Anything that's going to be inclusive, we're up for. We like to be innovative. I have a measured indifference to rules. I get in trouble for that. So
When you say that she has a son, is it when you're saying a son like a 12-year-old, 20-year-old? Are you saying a son who's older, but
early 20s? I think is, if I'm not mistaken. And there's another parent with a similarly situated son, and they're trying to gather people that might be equally interested in this intentional community. It's up not far from where SPAC is the land they bought and are looking to create this environment.
That's really nice.
Rachel, thanks for reminding me. I know we talked about it.
Do you think it's something that could grow within the Capital District to be not just in Saratoga, that if it's successful, they're looking to maybe have a couple of these facilities and maybe offer specific care for even like outpatient or community like holiday events? When I lived in Philadelphia, there was, I'm blanking on the name of the organization, but each synagogue would take a holiday and people with differences would come and be able to engage within the synagogue community and be respected and given an activity and a takeaway and be able to just kind of be with their peers and also with people who could give the opportunity to learn from them and with them and make connections. And I know we always had Hanukkah, so we always, would look forward to that. Is that something that this is also looking to do, or this is specifically a home kind of piece for people in that kind of need?
Well, I think everything has to be comprehensive, so that would be a wonderful component. Everything's on the table for discussion. I love your idea. Many of the folks that we support celebrate Hanukkah are Jewish, and we have people that came out of Willowbrook. A gentleman
I'm
named-
new to the community, so I don't know what Willowbrook is. I'm sorry.
Well, it was a cinder block building on Staten Island that was supposed to house about 1,500 and had 5,000 people in
Wow.
animal conditions, abusive and
Ugh.
neglective. That through federal court orders was disbanded, broken up, closed, and everybody was placed in community-based settings. It was a tragedy, but it was linchpin upon in our history, the DD history, upon which most of the current paradigm of services is based. We have someone who came from that setting who didn't even understand his own spirituality. His mother raised him until 2 or 3 as Jewish, but then he was in there. When he came out, we peeled away these layers of emotional atrophy, and he acted almost embattled all the time, was wildly aggressive. And the old paradigm, I'm going to go on very quickly. The old paradigm was he would tear the TV off the wall and punch a wall and hit some of the people that he lived with in his residence, or hit staff. And then he'd go like this, because he knew 4 people were going to come in and take him to the ground and hold him until he complied. That's what they did at Willowbrook, and that's what we originally did years ago at AIM. And then when I got here, I said, leave him alone. Don't touch him. If he throws a punch, duck. If he breaks something, we'll replace it. If he throws his TV, we'll get a new one. And all of a sudden, his behavior started to shift, and we saw it as communication. And he was like, hey, I'd like to be in the living room with my peers, and I'd like to go to the kitchen and make a sandwich. And the response from the old paradigm would be like, we can't let you do that because you're acting out. And he's like, I'm acting out because you won't let me do that.
Right.
So once we started that, he just, and then he's going to synagogue and he's enjoying services. And I was trying to dig up a picture of him with his yarmulke, because he's found his identity. We peeled away the layers and he's found his identity. So anything that would access the community in that regard, where he'd feel warm and invited and comfortable. He's also a Red Sox fan. Is sorry about that. I know I got far afield, but that his story is the story of the new way we support. But yeah, there's always connections to be made and interactions to be made with communities such as yourself, who would be welcoming. You're already making me think of a few things we can do maybe offline in the days to come.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I believe, Hazan, you are going to wrap this up for us. I just want to thank everyone who attended tonight. I want to thank Chris and Glenn for being here and presenting, and Rachel for all of your support with making this happen, and also for Peter. And, I'm so sorry for your loss, but a beautiful way to keep your brother's memory alive and educate the community. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here tonight to represent and be a part of this wonderful evening. Hazan?
Thank you, Manya. Manya is the head of our SADO, Social Action and Tikkun Olam Committee, and Eric Cooper is here, who's the head of our new Inclusion Committee. So thank you to both of those for really getting the ball rolling and making this event happen. And as we know it, today is the last day in February, but the efforts are certainly not ending, and we're working already to start next year to make it even bigger. Yeah. So Hazan Cantor, the floor is yours.
I had this wonderful evening with the words of our tradition from Psalm 133. Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Behold, how good and lovely it is for all peoples to sit together in unity. Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'manayim שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד.
Thank you, Hazan. That was beautiful. I just wanted to take a moment to do a little bit of a promotion. Somewhat of a promotion. On April 30th, Sunday, April 30th, we are doing a mitzvah day where we are giving back to our community through a variety of different social action projects. And registration will be on the website, hopefully within the next week or two, But there is information on the website. Currently, registration just is not posted yet, but we are doing a variety of projects for youth, for adults, for all different types of individuals in our community, and we invite you to all be a part of it. We would love to see you there and continue this discussion and this relationship and just continue to do good in our community. So I thank you, and I hope to see you at our next forum.
Thank you all, and hopefully we'll see everyone next week at the Holiday of Purim celebrations. Have a good night.
Thank you so
Thank
very
you
much.
all.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.